Okay, welcome to Cleveland Heights City Council Committee of the Whole meeting. It is Monday, July 7th at 6 p.m. Addie, would you call the roll?
Cobb.
Here.
Huda.
Here.
Petrus. Here. Larson. Here. Maddox.
Here.
Russell. Here. Kosh.
Here.
All right, we're going to do legislative review. It very well may be more than 15 minutes, which is fine. We're going to do the 1 minute rule, except for if you're introducing, if it's your legislation we're introducing, take a little bit longer if you need to, if there's some introduction that needs to be done. And I guess I'll just start going through that. We're also going to discuss the August calendar. And then Director Zanth is going to talk about the Community Improvement Corporation, agency agreement, and council's policy for awarding grants. And then if there's anything else, we'll go through that. So Councilman Petrus, if you could, when we're out there, we're going to need to amend the agenda for the 3 pieces of legislation, 143, 44, and 45.
And are they all first reading for adoption?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, so speaking of consideration for adoption, the first piece of legislation we're going to talk about is 139-2025, an ordinance amending Chapter 105 Public Records to add a new section, which is going to be 105.04 to prohibit the review or access of city email accounts of employees or elected officials without the consent or lawful approval pursuant to the Ohio Public Records Law. Councilman Cobb, do you want to expand on any of that?
I think it's pretty self-explanatory. I discovered that my email account was accessed by the mayor, and I think maybe Councilman Petrus's email account was accessed by the mayor. It didn't appear there had been any limitation on that access, and nothing went through the law department. As far as I can determine, there aren't any rules prohibiting what the mayor did. I just think that one elected official doesn't have the right to go through another elected official's emails without there being some guardrail or accounting for that occurring. And in this case, that is to go through the law department and make sure the law department is approving it, as opposed to just having the ability to sit down and access a council member's email account and look at all your emails.
Yeah. Go ahead, Councilman Larson.
I did a public records request and I too was subject to the mayor's request for emails twice in 2024. That included 2023 emails and 2024 emails. He did not use the public records request process. He queried the information directly from the city server. I believe the executive and legislative branches should be required to use a legal process established by the ORC. And I'm concerned about the IT department staff because they will be responsible, I assume, for only allowing access by the law department for public records requests. So what process could they use if they're given a request by the mayor or someone in the council to allow access to that employee or council? But per this ordinance, that individual should be denied that access. And we just hold up this legislation and say, so I can't do that.
I think it needs to get communicated to the IT department, and I had asked our IT director a straightforward question about whether my email account had been accessed by the mayor, and I didn't really get an honest, straightforward answer about it. So I'm not pleased about that. I'll leave it at that. And then that led me to make the public record request that I had to make to find out who's been reading my own emails. Pretty outrageous.
Oh, you made a public, I'm sorry.
Yes, I had to make a public records request to get the information about who had been accessing my emails.
Yeah, it's supposed to.
Before.
Well, did you get your question answered?
Sort of, kind of. I just want to express my concern that the IT department knows that this ordinance backs them up.
Do you think there's something that needs to be inserted into this legislation to, I just want to make sure that this is addressed.
I don't know where it would go, President Kuda. I'm not sure. The ordinance definitely gives the IT department the rationale for refusing such a request.
The law director is here.
Um,
Oh, okay.
number two, yeah, I see where it says IT support or cybersecurity without examining message content. So I don't know if does that mean, I'm looking at
Number 2.
B2. Councilman Cobb?
Well, I would just make this suggestion that if this legislation passes and if it goes into effect, that we send emails to the IT director essentially revoking access to our email accounts unless the statute is complied with.
Each of us individually.
Yes, that would be my suggestion.
All right, and does this legislation accomplish that? Because
Well, it sets forth the circumstances, so to the extent that the IT department has given the mayor access to our email accounts, that should get revoked.
okay. Go ahead, Councilman.
Wanted to add that before today, I was only aware of my own account and Councilman Cobb's account being accessed, but today I submitted public records request for the other 5 council members, and so whenever that's fulfilled, asking for the activity logs for other council members, so I'm happy to send those out after I receive them so that you can see whether your own accounts were accessed.
Just so you know, like maybe 4 or 5 days ago, I did a public records request for mine. Go ahead.
Yeah, I've already done mine and nothing came back on mine. But I did ask for all the email accounts that the mayor has actually proactively went and looked at. I was mostly concerned about our clerk. I'm also concerned if he's reading emails from other directors. I mean, it's really, in my opinion, inappropriate. So I'm certainly for this.
Let me just add here that in this ordinance, it does provide that violation of this ordinance by city employees shall be grounds for disciplinary action. So my read of that is that if a city employee assists someone in violating this ordinance, that they could be subject to disciplinary action. And then violations by elected officials subject to appropriate remedies permitted. And I have not researched whether we have any basis to bring a civil lawsuit for invasion of privacy or something like that for anyone that is going through our emails.
But you have to prove some kind of monetary damages, right?
Well, I don't know. I mean, there's some things called a tort that you get a nominal damage and potentially punitive. Whether this qualifies for that, I have no idea. But certainly, you know, if you're looking at an email that you've exchanged with a spouse or something that has nothing to do with city business, that's pretty egregious.
Well, since we're talking about enforcement and penalties, I mean, why is this so nebulous? I mean, just.
I can't think of a case where this is ever,
No, I'm talking about
come
the
up with.
enforcement, not the,
well,
you know, I don't have a handle on what the penalty is. I mean, I'm reading the wording, applicable.
yeah, I mean, and not having access to, you know, Westlaw or Lexis or another attorney because of the situation with the law department and not having the outside law firm available, I did the best that I could with coming up with this. So we may need to tweak it or take a look at it, but I think there's some urgency to addressing this right now.
No, I agree with that. I just thought there was a purposeful, and by the way, we can access Steve, Byron, sorry.
Oh, did that got?
Well, it's been 10 days, right? More than 10 days. It's just automatically.
So I would just say if we need to amend this going forward, it's my hope that this going into effect will be enough of a deterrent to stop it.
You know,
The law director.
yes,
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to point out that the engagement letter provided by Steve Byron and Singerman Mills has not yet been executed. So it's not yet available So.
So-
The engagement letter itself says that while council is vested with the authority to engage consultants, the mayor must sign the agreement in order to make a legally binding contract on the city. Your legislation does direct the mayor to sign the agreement, but I don't think that the 10 days have run prior to the meeting.
I see, okay. So who needs to make sure that happens?
Yeah, I'm happy to follow up.
Thank you. All right, I think I'm satisfied with where we're at. And I do agree there is urgency here. Any other questions, comments on this piece? All right, let's go to 140, 2025, an ordinance amending chapter 121.05, rules and regulations relating to mayor's authority over city property and declaring that it's, yeah, okay. So this has to do with, well, go ahead, Councilman.
Well, first, let me say this. I guess I'm torn about this legislation because it does present the opportunity for a city council to micromanage whoever the mayor is in respect to the city property. So I think we need to be very cautious about exercising that authority going forward. I do believe that City Council does have the authority to have this ordinance and authority to have control of the property in the city. For example, there's nothing in the charter that vests the mayor with authority over properties. It's all in various city ordinances. The fact that City Council approval is required for purchase of property, transfer of city property is, to me, evidence of the fact that ultimately that is City Council's authority. This specific legislation has come about as a result of the installation of the security cameras within the law department.
Quick question. You said in various ordinances. So my question is, could this ordinance conflict with some other ordinances that do vest other?
I think the only other potential ordinance is the one that vested, and I had overlooked this when I originally drafted it, that vested, and here's the thing, the Department of Parks and Recreation, it's got the same clause in section 135 I think that's 135.03. That gives the Department of Parks and Recreation relating to the care, control, or use of city property. That same clause relating to the use, rule, or regulation of city property is also vested in the mayor under the original 121.05. So we had, in essence, competing clauses on that. But both of these are vestiges of when we had a city manager.
Right.
But I'm not aware of any other conflicts with any other ordinances vesting anyone else with control over property.
Councilman Posh, and
Did I
then
miss one?
I may go to the law director on this about the potential conflict. Go ahead.
So walk me through the process in this particular example. I mean, there's a sense of urgency because of the cameras, but let's say something else comes up. But maybe use the cameras as an example. So we pass this tonight. Hypothetically, let's say we pass this tonight. What are our next steps? I mean, do we need to vote on something like this for the specific cameras? How do you envision that?
The next step would be a resolution that would require 5 council members to override the use that the mayor has imposed. Again, I think this is something that power should only be exercised in extreme circumstances.
By the way, you had a really good job with the purpose statement, so thank you.
Mr. President,
Yes,
I might, as you know, the law department did not review these draft pieces of legislation substantively. But in looking at it, sitting here, I see a couple of form-related amendments that I would suggest. I think the clerk could probably make them and be amended on the substitution. and I'm referring again to ordinance 140/2025. One is that in a number of locations it refers to chapter 121.05 rules and regulations. I think that that would be better styled as section 121.05. So I'd make that change throughout. And then there should also be a new section 2 with renumbering required after that, that provides that the prior version of section 121.05 pre-amendment is repealed.
You say repealed?
Which section?
121.05 as it existed prior to its
Right,
amendment
but
and passage.
which section of the,
A new section 2, so after section 1,
okay,
and then everything else.
is this something you can do, we'll throw it together? Alright, go ahead, Councilman.
So where does that leave us in terms of this legislation this evening?
We would amend it and vote on the amended version.
City Council? Okay. I like the idea that the rules and regs written by the mayor should be included, will be included in copies to the various places, but I also like to see it included in employee handbook as a separate page by itself. So, because we're holding the employees subject to it as well. So
I mean, do we have
that's-
the authority to do that? I'm asking the law director, I guess.
I don't think council has the ability to modify the employee.
Okay, so it's a suggestion that the mayor might wanna consider. And I also think that because we're leaving this for the mayor to do, I would like to see our clerk assign the task of following up to make certain that these rules and regs are established and available. Posted as defined in the legislation.
Any other comments?
Let me just, that B, I took that out of my existing ordinance. So that's already in there
Okay, thank you.
under the prior one. I didn't add that, but again, I'm not aware of any rules or regulations.
Yes, and so, yeah, I'm fine, thanks.
Sorry.
Okay, 141, an ordinance amending chapter 105 public records to add section 105.05 to prohibit the use of city social media accounts and email systems for political messaging and limiting their use to official informational purposes. Councilman Cobb?
Okay, so this goes back to last summer. Originally, I had some concerns that July 29th posting that the mayor did where he launched the investigation of city council members was political. Then last December 20th, we had the posting on our social media, damn right on the problem, blaming the 6 council members. And then there have been continued use of the city email to do what I would consider to do more than just simply disseminating factual neutral information regarding city programs, announcing city-sponsored events, providing emergency notifications. It's been advancing a political point of view, often attacking city council members, and I think that's an inappropriate use of the city social media. Again, something that was that email,
Yeah.
the Instagram,
Yeah.
the official Facebook, all of the city ordinances predate any social media. I couldn't find any place else in the country where we've had to, deal with something like this happen. And I think it's only going to get worse if we don't take some action to try and prevent it. And the same would be applicable to city council if we decided that we wanted to have a Facebook, that we've often talked about having our own posting, our own social media. So it's not just against the mayor, this applies to everyone.
Right.
with the official government social media accounts.
And if we were ever allowed to use, the e-newsletter and so forth, the rules would apply. Go ahead, Councilman Maddox.
So after looking at the three pieces we discussed, my only concern in terms of one of the statements that you just made, Councilman Cobb, is that all of those statements or emails were political. It's clear to me over a year ago when I stated and I asked for risk mitigation measures for this council that we had severe issues involving personal emails and our city emails with this council and whatever else everyone feels with the administration. That was never political, that was a fact. It's a fact that 3 council members had a meeting, used a private email, and set out an agenda for that. 2 of them are next to me on this committee. So I don't wanna be insulted by stating that did not happen. That was a clear violation because in that agenda, they were discussing housing issues. And so I wanna make sure that we are not just focusing on anything that's coming out of the administration. I have made it very clear that accountability is for all. Any regulations that we are creating, any legislation that we're moving or policies, need to firmly make it clear that those actions were also irresponsible, and we need to make sure that that does not happen again. There's been zero discussion about it. There's been zero policies created around that. I've asked for over a year, and now we have these. When you were asked at the table, you stated the reason we could not discuss this in terms of what the council was doing because it was political. But now we're here in the middle of a mayoral race and we're bringing all this up. And that's kind of hypocritical to me and many people watching. And so I'm not here to argue or push back. I'm simply stating that if we're going to build policies and regulations, we need to step back and take a look at this and tell ourselves, this isn't just about what the administration has done. This is also about what's happening across council leadership as well. This isn't something I've just brought up. I've told you we have risk issues on this council that have put us at risk based on how people have maneuvered and handled city business. That is a fact, and that is separate from anything else that this administration has done. That tells me that there's a training issue that needs to happen. So I guess my question is, how are we addressing the fullness of what's happening here? Because this isn't just an issue with the administration. We have not addressed any of the risks that has happened through the council. We want to make sure that that's
I think
handled.
the last thing Councilman Cobb just said was that it does apply across the board.
But respectfully, he stated that everything that the mayor stated was political. That was not political. That was a fact.
Well, I mean,
And with all due respect, I don't want to argue with you because you had a meeting, but that meeting happened. Those emails were in private emails and that was inappropriate. And I've been trying to deal with those policies just like we're trying to deal with what's happening at the administration for over a year now. So I don't want to push back on that, but I'm simply saying if we're going to handle this, we need to handle risk mitigation for all of the policies that have been violated and laws that have been broken. And I don't see that being addressed here. And I don't want us to just lean in on administration and act like we have clean hands. There are people at this table that do not have clean hands in terms of public meetings and the Public Meeting Act. It was violated. That is clear. That is clear. And the public was lied to in an open meeting about it. That cannot, there's an agenda and it has private emails. So let's move on from that and say, what are we going to do to make sure it does not happen again?
Okay,
This doesn't do anything to mitigate.
I mean, we have had meetings about that.
We have not.
No, I'm saying the council leadership has had meetings.
That doesn't help the rest of this council.
Please let me say, full sentence. And they have been addressed in the forum that was asked for it to be addressed.
No,
I
they're
can't,
not, Mr.
excuse me, I can't help it if this thing has languished on and on and on, certainly had nothing to do with us.
It did. You
Go ahead.
paused and refused
Go ahead,
to have the
Council.
meeting
No,
that has to
that's
What
happen
I'm
about.
concerned
Councilor
about
Bunch.
is this investigation and accusations being made right now that laws have been broken. Okay, so I've been told they have not. There's been a certain number of emails, it's all been public. The process that you do when you see something like that as an elected official is you take it to common pleas court and you ask for a ruling. You don't mudsling, you don't drag it through the mud. When you drag it through the mud, which is what we see right now, that is political. But if this was a real problem, the mayor and his lawyers should take it to common pleas court and get a definitive ruling. Okay? That's what they should do.
Here's the, no. Here's the thing, excuse me. This is the thing right now. We have a piece of legislation. This is what we're talking about right now. and I wanna stay on the topic.
This
That's,
is the topic.
Yeah, well, that- no.
It's risk around emails and violations
Please,
of policies.
please, you haven't been
Mr.
recognized.
Mr. President,
Listen,
Mr. President.
we have a time limit.
Yes, but
and-
when you make statements that are not true, I have to defend myself.
Okay, you-
And you stated
I'm
that
saying
number one,
anything
this
about
wasn't
you.
on the topic, and number two, this wasn't addressed.
I'm saying this.
You and Mr. Posh, Councilman Posh, refused to hold a meeting I asked to have conversations about this council and its use of those emails and its training and risk mitigation. Refused for over a year. Every single meeting I've asked and it was pushed off. We'll get to it in January, we'll get to it in February, we'll get to it in March. So when you stay here and you state that you did not have anything to do with that, that is not true. You all pushed off the conversation this council should have had about those actions. We never had a meeting. You and I and these colleagues never, I don't know what you and Councilwoman Russell had with the administration, but we never had a meeting
didn't
about
say we
those
did.
issues. So that's what I'm stating here. It has not been addressed, it has not been dealt with. So my question
It's
again,
not been
so
reviewed.
is anyone in this council still using private emails to do city business? And if so, why?
Okay.
And if not, when did that stop? We haven't had that conversation. Clearly, there
You
were
have an-
training
you
and
have an answer?
violation issues.
Go ahead.
So,
Answer to that.
yes,
Go ahead.
I have to
please.
use private emails because our system is antiquated, and if I travel overseas, I can't get my emails. I missed the budget hearings because I didn't know what the dates were.
So have you been discussing any city business in your private email with the majority of my colleagues or any colleagues that I'm on a committee with?
No, not the
Because
majority.
I asked Councilwoman Larson that, Councilman Petrus that, and Tony Kuda, Council President, and they all lied to me in a council meeting, city council said they never had a meeting, and then we see a magical agenda show up. You don't think that's a problem? When I asked point blank, 3 of my council members if they had a meeting, they say no, and then an agenda from a private email shows up, that is not needed for an investigation. That happened, it's a fact, just like everything else you're pouring out on this table. Let's give everyone the same level of accountability that you're trying to give the mayor. Let's not play games. I had 3 attorneys tell me they broke the law. So you telling me you talked to attorneys said they did means absolutely nothing. They absolutely did. I sit on the housing committee. His agenda in his private email states that they discussed housing issues, including 2 pieces of legislation. I wasn't there. That's a clear violation. I don't care what their opinion is. It happened. So let's just hold everyone to the same standard. It looks bad to the residents when you can't even admit that you did something wrong. Let's not do that. So my question for administrative services is, when is that
Councilman,
going to be addressed in the legislation?
Councilman, we have a 1-minute rule. You're way over.
You don't
And
get
you're
to
not
tell
recognized.
lies and tell me I can't release
Nobody's
speech
saying
info, Mr.
anything
President.
about
That's the only reason I'm
We're
not
not even
trying to
addressing
push
what
back.
you're saying. We're not, so how? Go
You're
ahead.
not addressing
Go ahead.
anything.
And then we gotta-
Councilman.
Take this to common pleas court.
I'm not gonna do anything. The residents see clearly, there was an illegal meeting and you all are shirking
Take it.
responsibility, but leaning on
I
to
didn't shirk any
administration when
responsibility.
people at this table have violated the law.
Okay.
I'll say all I gotta say, they're watching on the cameras, they can
Was
see
I
it,
recognized?
they can see it,
Yes.
Okay.
they lied.
Take it to common pleas court.
I don't have to do it, the residents
you
can
do.
see it,
You're
everyone
making
can see it.
accusations.
It's not an accusation, it's a fact. Anyone can watch, anyone can see the agenda, anyone can watch the 3 of them lie to a whole city on a council meeting at 7:30 p.m. when I asked them point blank. I don't play games with people. One thing I do is hold accountability for all.
All right,
If we're gonna sit here and pass legislation for this mayor, we're gonna hold everyone at this table accountable. They lied, he had meetings he shouldn't have had, and a leader says, you know what, I did that, I shouldn't have, I'll make adjustments and put policies in place to make sure this doesn't happen. There's been 0 accountability for the 3 of them for the meeting that they had. Thank you.
All right.
That's a fact.
So any other comments about this 141, 2025? Yes, go ahead.
I'd like to make a statement that it's necessary to make certain that the residents of the city can trust the information in the city, e-news as an example, and that they're receiving information relevant to the services they deserve to receive. My concern is who determines if there is a violation of this ordinance, because
Yeah,
some of the
I wrote the
wording
same thing.
used is could be up for interpretation, so if we were concerned, it would go back to the law department, I guess.
Well, that's Councilman Cobb. Who determines if an infraction has
You
been?
know, it's like sometimes trying to reach a definition for something, it's, you know,
Well-
it's like obscenity. It's hard to define. You know it when you see it. And I think we can look at something on social media and say, are you crossing the line with it? And so, yeah, is some of this a judgment call? but some of the communications that have been put out, they're not even a close call. And that's the goal of this legislation is to stop that from happening. But again, the rule is, it's only as good if the people are gonna follow the rule. And if they're not, they're not, but it's there. So do you end up having to go to court to try and get an injunction over the use of something? Let's hope it doesn't come to that. Again, I hope that this law has a deterrent effect.
So you have the definitions here,
Right.
and you have the prohibited uses, but I understand the question, because council's gonna have to say, like a communication would have to go out, and council would say, this is a violation, and then we go to the enforcement and penalties, and, go ahead, you can finish.
What can the remedies here are elected officials can be subject to public censure or other actions permitted by law. Again, this is new territory. I don't know that any other city has had to face this kind of situation.
Yeah. Go ahead, Councilman.
So I'd suggest that, we do have a lawyer hopefully teed up that I would think that should look at this. I think there's a sense of urgency that we do need to get these things passed tonight. But I do think we should send this to the lawyer just to review. There's gotta be some best practices out there. I mean, I'd love to be able to ask for a law department, but I'm afraid that they're conflicted on this.
Yeah.
I would think other cities have been faced with this, maybe not necessarily in Ohio, but maybe in other states. Let's give an expert at this who has access to Westlaw and stuff like that can help us with this. But pass these tonight. If that's the will of the council.
How many more days we have before we have access to the lawyer?
Well, the 10 days have passed, but the mayor needs to sign, I don't know if you heard,
Yeah, I heard
yeah, that's what we're waiting for, so
it. So it
so
could be
the
any
answer is
day
no
or
more
it could be-
days,
Oh,
there's no more days that we need to wait for the legislation. The 10 days has passed, we just need the mayor to sign that.
before the lawyer can look at anything.
Right, that's right, the engagement letter, yeah.
Mr. President, if I could ask the law director a question,
Yeah.
is there any limitation on how long it might take the mayor to sign this? So for example, if a month were to pass before he signed it, would that be permissible? Is that your understanding?
I think that's not what's contemplated by the legislation. So I have not had that conversation with the mayor yet.
Okay.
So I'll follow up.
But, yeah, Councilman Larson, I do understand your question, and I do understand that it is a judgment call.
Can be.
You can be, yeah, well, yeah. All right, 142 is an ordinance amending ordinance number 27-2025 to provide the resurfacing of the eastbound rather than westbound portion of Euclid Heights Boulevard. This is between Cedar and Coventry.
President Kudo,
Yes.
I was just curious to know if somebody knows when the Westlawn side would be done on the city's project list.
Let's see. Right through clean scale, so, yeah.
I think that I previously asked, correct, whenever it was planned for the westbound portion, I asked when the eastbound portion would be done, and I think that she said the following year. So if now we're doing the eastbound, presumably westbound will be next year. I will just say, I was so grateful whenever I saw this come up, because that eastbound portion is so bad, so thank you, Mr. Director. Thanks, sir.
All right, 143 is, these are the add-ons. An ordinance calling an election to be held on September 9th for the removal of the mayor from office. Any questions about this? 5-day period had passed. Pardon? Oh, right, thank you. Anybody want their name on this? 143? This is, I'll read it again. An ordinance calling an election to be held September 9th, 2025 on the question of the removal of the mayor from office. Director Hannah, is my understanding that the charter makes this compulsory for council?
It is required.
Yes. Names on this? Raise your hand.
Is it
I
appropriate
think it's
that
highly inappropriate.
council members be
I
signing on to this legislation?
Well, you have a rule that
This was
says that
the
every
question
piece of
asked by the-
legislation will bear the
the clerk of council, so.
name of a council member introducing the same.
This is quite required by the ordinance, right?
Did we do that for citizens for an elected mayor? When you had,
Or the park thing. Remember that?
Yeah,
know
I don't think that
issue.
had any
Well,
sponsoring.
let's look. I don't know how you do a piece of legislation without sponsor. I don't know if
I think at the very least, if it's gotta have a sponsor, it should at least be someone who's not running for office this year. I mean, this looks extremely inappropriate.
All right,
Ask for sponsor, something
let's-
we gotta do.
Let's just
anyways,
make sure
but
we're raising our hands and being recognized. So if it doesn't need a sponsor, Director Hannah, I'm fine with that. If it does, I'm certainly willing to listen to volunteers.
It was introduced by Councilman.
What it was.
The,
You say it. I'm not sure what the it is.
this is the
The park?
card one.
Okay.
Oh, no, sorry, hold on. Sorry,
that was like February of 2022.
yeah, that's not, oh, here. Yeah, it was Council President thing.
And how about, can we go back to the elected mayor provision? That would have been,
I know a year, but what month?
Yeah, what year?
that would have been August of 2019, I believe, because right, it got to the Board of Election on the eve of when it needed to get there.
It might have been early September.
First meeting in September.
I mean, I'm just saying, I think it's possible, so late August, early September, 2019. And that should narrow it down a little bit. Yeah, go ahead.
If I could,
While we're waiting.
yeah, I noticed that the agenda has been updated to say 143, 144, 145. Do you still need to amend it?
Yeah, I would do it just because I just lit.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, let's just move along and we'll come back to it so many times. Let me just. Okay. 144 is the resolution, amending resolution number 12, 2025 for the purpose of authorizing the expenditure of an additional $5,263.92 under the agreement with Frank Novak and Sons to furnish the labor, material, and equipment necessary for sandblasting, painting, and related purposes to repairing Cumberland Pool. And then resolution 145 is a resolution amending resolution number 242, 2024 for the purpose of authorizing expenditure of an additional $18,284.69 with SCG Fields LLC to furnish the labor, material, and equipment necessary for the public improvement of the synthetic turf soccer field at Denison. So we got the Cumberland Pool sandblasting and the soccer field. Yes.
Director Harrison, do you have a date for receipt of this invoice from Frank Novak for the pool work? Because the date on the invoice is 6/1/25, and then the premium down in the body of the executive work order, premium time for Saturday 5/24/25 and double time for Sunday 6/1/25. So I'm thinking that maybe you got the invoice later than 6/1/25, even though it's dated this first.
I've not seen the invoice yet, but I can research that for you. It has not come across my desk.
Okay, so that's why it hasn't been paid as well, so
Correct.
I definitely know, it needs to be paid, so I have no problems about that.
Okay. And that is for Frank Novak.
Yes.
I will research that for you first thing in the morning.
And it was by Councilmember.
A council member?
Yeah.
Yes.
Mr. President, if I might, on that question, your council rule section 111.16 of the codified ordinances provides in part that each resolution or ordinance when introduced shall have the name of the member introducing the same, words thereon, and shall have a number assigned to it by the clerk and shall thereafter be referred to by number. The initiative, petition, election, calling, legislation, had the council president at the time as the introducing member. Issue 26 in 2019 had Councilmember Yashman, again consistent with the rule, as the introducing member.
Let's just finish this one up. Yeah, go ahead.
And I have another question about the rule.
Yeah.
Director Gonzalez, is it still leaking or are we good for this season?
So what we discovered is just additional, the freeze and thaw cycles has caused the main drain, the valve to be leaking. So we brought in 3 different companies to evaluate it. And we're just waiting back for proposals to try to fix the main valve leak right now. But as far as the other leaks, we're doing very good with that.
All right, thank you.
So
Any other questions about these two pieces of legislation? All right, so we're looking for I'm sorry. Yeah, well, let's just go back to the
143.
143. So we need a sponsor for that legislation.
I have you, Larson and Tosh, anyone else?
And then lastly, a second reading. This is an ordinance amending chapter 105 public records, part 1 of the administrative code of the city for rules. This is rules for emails. Let me get to that.
So this is the with some revisions, the legislation that was originally introduced by the mayor last year in connection with the city emails. And this is section 105.03. This kind of goes hand in hand with the 105.04, 105.05 that we're adopting tonight. I did make some revisions to this. The clear intent of this legislation is to require city council members to use their city email accounts and not their private email accounts. It was amended to say when practical, as opposed to automatically requiring it, because there are some circumstances where city council members may not have the city's email account downloaded on their personal devices or able to access through the internet their city email accounts. And I think that Member Posh was one person that had that issue. It also requires that if you get one in your private email or your campaign email account and you're responding to it, it involves city business, that you copy your city email account. And it makes it clear that we are to comply with the Ohio Sunshine Laws and the Public Records Act.
Yeah, go ahead.
I have no objection to the email as amended, or the legislation as amended. I do have a question, I raised this at the Admin Services meeting as well. We have citizen committees, we have commissions and boards that, if you read under the now thereof in section 1, B, it delineates who may have an account set up, whether an email account. But we're struggling, for instance, in the Climate Environmental Sustainability Committee and the Transportation Committee with possibly having an email that residents could send a concern to that committee via the email. So I don't wanna hold the legislation up tonight, but I'd just like to have that taken into consideration. They have an opportunity to make that request somehow.
I think the fix that was suggested for that was that somehow that Addie would be the gatekeeper for that. And those committees or boards would have an official email address that would go through Addie.
Okay.
And so they wouldn't be issued or using an official city email account. It would be going through Addie.
So you can do that?
I can't set it up though. That would have to be from,
Well, yeah,
I can't set it up.
we have to explore how that can be done.
Okay. Alright.
Yeah, go ahead.
Mr. President, this being a piece of legislation introduced last year that I did take a look at then, I don't think I have a lot of us has any issues commenting on this. And I did want to suggest one tweak for council's consideration, and this is from a standpoint of enhancing legal compliance. And that would be in proposed new section 105.03C, reverting to the language that was previously present and not making the changes and new additional language suggested, but to address the point that was made about certain situations in which the city email may not be available. I think council could accomplish that by changing the period at the end of that sentence that was struck to a comma, and then adding unless use of the official city email account or system is impossible or impracticable. And I think it sets forth an affirmative requirement to use city email, but provides a reasonable safety valve in those situations where it's not available to the official, the mayor or council.
Mr. President.
Yes, that makes sense.
Mr. Law Record, does this as written ensure anything like Instagram Messenger, Facebook Messenger, any social media messengers, or any other type of tools as well, or is it strictly email as written?
As I read this, I think this is for city emails.
That's what I
Email, because it even refers somewhere in here to use of the email medium.
That's what.
So those are ways of communication that at some point y'all may want to take a look at, but at the moment this deals with email.
Councilman Posh?
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Just along with that, we need to adjust that we're in 2025 and that's something that happens now. That's not something.
Oh, you're offering an amendment.
We need to, unless you guys are disagreeing with me, because you could have a whole group message and Facebook Messenger and get around that whole email, and I just wanna make sure this is clear and we have clear guardrails. I don't want anyone saying they were confused later, cause we haven't had any training or discussions around this, so I don't know what anyone thinks. So I would like it spelled out in here, unless we're gonna sit down as a council and have some type of risk training. I'm assuming everyone doesn't know what they're talking about, and that this needs to be spelled out exactly how we can talk together. So I would like that included in there, social media and any other form of communication.
Go ahead.
Okay, I got two things, but to add on to what you're gonna say, before I ask Law Director Hannah one other question, doesn't that become, right, okay, so in concept, I agree with what you're saying. I think in practicality, someone Facebook messages you and say, hey, I live on Oakdale, what day's my trash day? Councilman Posh, and you know it's Monday, and you type Monday, that is now a simple response. Now, if it was my personal email, I would send it through my city email, because that's sort of like a best practice, that makes the most sense. But I think, and maybe I just answered my own question there on how to get around this. I mean, it is real easy to just say, hey, it's Monday and move on. I guess, are you suggesting we do, you don't answer on Facebook, or you say, hey, just let me email you the
My concern
response?
really isn't about the residents, it's about members of council in a Facebook group and message. So if there's some way to distinguish that too, I just wanna make sure that council understands the parameters and how we need to do business, whether it's through email or in person. I just don't want any members of council, present or future, to be able to create a whole other social media group to communicate. Cause it can turn into a Merry Christmas, the next thing you know, they're talking about legislation. I just think we need to set some type of parameters around that, even a text message group, which there's several with council members here now. I just think it opens up that door, and that's why I wanted to have that broader conversation. That maybe there's nothing nefarious happening, people don't understand. But when you're having these text message groups or these Facebook groups, those are indeed conversations between us. And so I'm more concerned about that than I am with our individual council conversation with residents. But I just want to make sure it's spelled out that no group of council members should be having a conversation on any medium, any communication that way about council business.
Yeah, it's pretty obvious that
I don't think it's
Yeah.
obvious based on what's happening.
you don't know what I was gonna say. And I'm gonna say exactly what I just said. I think it's pretty obvious that we all have, these one-on-one conversations with residents. Hey, blah, 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 something happened, what do you think? And we do that. I think it needs to be specific to council. Okay, go ahead.
There's
And then-
part two to this, and that is add mail, not email, but calendar access to this, because one of my concerns is juggling multiple calendars. As a business person, also with the home life, you have multiple electronic calendars, and you want your city calendar to be blended with that. And at least in the school board, I've never received one here in Cleveland Heights yet, but you will get public information requests. But did you have a meeting with someday? And so you need to have full access to email. I would suggest that you put email on this, but that's super prohibitive for the limits we have unless we have hot email access or IMAP email access. It's impractical for us to implement that. I guess what I'm trying to demonstrate is there's a little bit of a slippery slope here. I mean, have other cities, this goes back to a question I had during your administrative services meeting. What other cities have passed legislation like this? I mean, the mayor, you introduced this, you came up with it somehow. Are there other cities that have this, that have similar legislation?
My apologies, it's been quite a while since I introduced this. And so I think maybe if you want to give me some time, I can get back to you about the research that I did back then.
So then here's the
We
question.
gotta wrap this up.
Here's the question for the law director. I think the work that is needed on this to address communication avenues broader than city emails, that can't be done this evening. The other legislation that we're planning on voting on is section 105.0405. Can we enact 04 and 05 without doing something for 03?
Yes.
Okay.
Everybody says lawyers equivocate, and that was
And you got some,
And
you
that's
got those
why,
blank
and that's
stares.
why the lawyer asked the law
So
director
does that mean we need to
expert.
amend this to,
Well,
So you could,
we have
for
a
instance,
legislation for
indicate
social
in the
media.
codified ordinances that, if this were codified and codified ordinances updated before this were adopted, so you could have a reserved bracketed reference to section 15.03.
is that what you wanna do?
Yeah, let's do that, and then I will work on revising this further, making the change that you suggested, and then addressing other social media and text messaging, which was not part of the mayor's original
And
legislation
between council, and specifically between council members.
between council members.
So
And
it's
I will
not
try to, I'll have,
just so it's not misconstrued as, we can't do, talk back and forth with residents.
right, and again, my intent was to work with the mayor's email legislation, and so we can get that adopted and council members would know what the parameters were, but and I think based on what everyone is saying, we're open to including text messages, Instagram, other methods of communication.
Go ahead, Vice President.
Yes, I was gonna say, this one is about total emails, but the legislation you just presented regarding the city's Facebook page, e-news and all that, couldn't that be what you're talking about for text messages be adopted in that legislation? Since it's all about social media and
I think it's cleaner to have rules for city emails and council communications.
all in one, in the one for emails.
Right.
Go ahead, Mayor.
Okay.
So at the risk of, I don't know, operating counter to what my reputation probably is, I think that maybe the addition or any work that would lend to an addition of some sort of supplementary regulation on council members using Facebook to communicate, whether it's in a group or round robin or anything like that. All of that is already addressed in both state and local law. The words don't stop the behavior, so adding more words to it doesn't really necessarily do anything functionally except maybe clarify. But the law is already clear.
I think those are, to your point, Mayor, Open Meetings Act concerns, and another option council could consider is proceeding with this, potentially with the amendment that was discussed, because it is sort of a standalone use of city email platform for city business, where, my knowledge, not everybody has a city Instagram account, right? So I think that the scope of the regulation is somewhat different, and those issues are more related to the propriety of and the compliance with the Open Meetings Act of members of public bodies.
Go ahead, and then we really have to move on.
I might state that, I will state that, this is legislation regarding city emails, and I would like to see it in place this evening, because I think we all need to be reminded that if we've got emails coming into our personal email accounts, that city business needs to be forwarded to your city email. It's a bit trickier when you're talking about Facebook, do we just, if a fellow council person reaches out to us, we just say, send me an email and my government, it gets stickier. This is really cleanly worded and ready to go. So I would support putting this legislation on the books tonight, voting for approval.
You could amend further in the future.
Sure.
To do that.
Yeah.
Why don't
Makes sense.
Why don't we do that? Why don't we make the change the law director suggested earlier, and I'll work up something of an amendment to address Councilmember Maddox's concerns, a statement of, compliance with the Ohio Sunshine Laws or Ohio Public Act.
Oh,
So
referring
we'll
to it.
work and put that as an additional provision in here.
All right, well, that's fine with me.
Did you get that language that he has?
Okay, we need to move on to item number 3 on our agenda.
We actually skip over the experience budgets.
Oh, Jason's on that. Okay, all right, so we'll skip to 4, but we're gonna come back to the August calendar in a few minutes. And Director Zamp, you wanna? Yeah, I think that's here. It's easier. Let's see.
Oh,
So this is the agency agreement that we've been discussing, and, well, you don't need to do this.
Yeah, I just wanted to give a brief introduction, since this is a different type of topic that we're talking about. This is our Cleveland Heights Community Improvement Corporation and the agency agreement between the city, i.e. council, and that organization just brief background, in Ohio, CICs are quasi governmental nonprofit corporations, and they're authorized under the Ohio Revised Code in chapters 1724 and organized under chapter 1702. There are two types of CICs, we don't need to get into that, but they've been around for a long time. There are approximately 300 in the state, and some of the ones that are nearby include Euclid, Shaker Heights, University Heights. One South Euclid is not a CIC, it's a CDC, but it functions in very much the same way. And we're gonna talk in a little bit in a minute about what a CIC does. The Cleveland Heights CIC was actually formed in 2019, but lay dormant for a number of years. And then in 2023, you guys adopted an ordinance, or council adopted an ordinance that expanded the membership, which includes the mayor, the president of council, the chair of the planning and development committee of council, the planning and development director, and then 3 at-large, or 5 appointed members, 3 of which are appointed. Council, when you were doing the ARPA allocations, allocated $300,000 towards an executive director and some other components. Right now, I'm the acting interim executive director while we look for a full-time director. And we have other officers, including a secretary treasurer, et cetera. There's a number of documents that a CIC needs to function, including articles of incorporation. Those have all been discussed and dealt with by the CIC over the past couple of months. But perhaps the most important one is the agency agreement. So this is the rules of the road, so to say, the understanding between the city or the municipality and the CIC. And it's really important that we get on the same page. There actually had been an agency agreement that was completed for the 2019 version of the CIC, but it didn't comport completely with the ORC. And so when Jason Dodson from Retzel, our outside counsel, were looking at kicking the CIC off again, we said, let's start fresh. And so I'm going to turn it over to Jason to walk you through this agency agreement that's a draft before you. There's no intention tonight for any sort of vote. This is just an introduction, although at a future point in August or September, we're going to bring it forward for formal votes at both the CIC and on the council level. So Jason, if you want to walk them through what this does and how it comports with ORC and some of the specific things that we did for Cleveland Heights.
Sure. Thank you, Eric. I just want to make sure that I had my audio turned on there. In terms of the prior agency agreement, I think the biggest issue we had is that we were not able to locate a signed one that was executed by either the city or the CIC. So as far as we know, no executed agency agreement exists between the city and the CIC. Going back to the creation of the CIC, unless of course Eric tells me he's found one in the last few months. So with that, if you look at 1724, chapter 1724 of the Ohio Revised Code, that's the chapter that deals with community improvement corporations. And 1724-10 deals specifically then with an agency agreement that would exist, and does exist in other communities between the city or the village and the Community Improvement Corporation. And none of what we're talking about here, you'll see there's a lot of words on 6 pages, but it really basically boils down to a few different functions, and those functions track pretty closely with 1724-10 of the Revised Code. So the first thing we're doing, and this is going to be on page 2 of the agreement, is we designate the CIC as the agent of the city for the purposes set forth in the agreement. And that's kind of a precursor that you have to do as part of 1724-10 is to designate the CIC as the agent of the city for what we're about to talk about. Then the second thing that this agreement does, which is the first thing that the CIC may serve as the agent of the city on, is the CIC can serve as the city's agent to sell any city-owned real property that the city may wish to dispose of. That under that provision does not require the property to actually transfer to the CIC. The property can remain held by the by the city at all times. And essentially use the CIC as its agent, just like you may a real estate agent or broker, to go out and sell that property on behalf of the city, to essentially find buyers, negotiate pricing, and ultimately negotiate a contract on behalf of the city. If that is done, then that property does not need to be disposed of through a competitive process. It doesn't need to be set out for bid. It doesn't need to have any other competitive process put in place there. It would simply be the CIC goes and finds the buyer and brings that back to council for approval. Now, under that scenario, city council is the one who makes the decision as to when they're going to use the CIC in order to sell, and I keep saying sell, but sell or lease property. The CIC doesn't have the authority to just go do it by itself. We've structured this agreement to state that there has to be an agreement that would be approved by both city council and the CIC that would pertain to a particular piece of property before it could be sold or leased on behalf of the city by the CIC. And that resolution has to identify what compensation the CIC may receive for serving in that agent capacity. Now, I will tell you, certainly everything I just outlined there about serving as the agent to sell the property is in the revised code. It is a power that presumably the CIC can do on behalf of the city. What I would tell you in practice is that typically isn't the primary use of CICs by other communities. A lot of other communities have adopted charters that have a little bit more lenient process on disposing of property than you would find in the revised code. You all, I believe, have similar provisions about disposing of property that's a little bit more lenient than the Ohio Revised Code. So we've put this in here because it's contemplated by the statute. But I'm not sure how much that portion, which is section 2 of the agreement, will actually be used. So turning then to what most cities use their CIC for, this is going to be section 3 of the agreement, which is also on page 3 of the agreement. And this is similar to what we just talked about, but pretty markedly different as well. Under section 3, the city is able to transfer property to the CIC. That can be for $1, it can be for market value, whatever may ultimately be there. The property is sold or transferred over to the CIC. The CIC then has the ability to dispose of that property through sale or lease to any other third party. And again, does not have to follow a competitive process, is able to go out, solicit buyers or lessees of the property and undertake the transaction with the ultimate purchaser or lessee of the property. Again, before property would come over to the CIC, we contemplate here that there would be legislation that would be approved by council, a board resolution that would also be approved by the CIC that would set forth the terms that are going to accompany that piece of property when it comes over to the CIC. So, we're going to give you this property, CIC, but here's the limitations or here's the constraints. Here's what you're authorized to do with the property. And then within that, you'll see in section, this is in section 3C, general rule here would be that any property that's given to the CIC is able to keep the net earnings from the sale. So if it goes over for $1 and the CIC sells it for $100, it would be able to keep the $99 and give $1 back to the city. unless the CIC and the city agreed otherwise in terms of how that would be handled. And those would be the net savings or what get retained by the CIC. So the CIC is going to pay all the costs of the transaction that it may actually be responsible for in that agreement with the third party. And then from there, anything above what it paid to the city, it's going to be able to keep. So it's able to keep, again, those net proceeds. I will tell you, in comparison to the first function, this would be the function that most communities use their CIC for. And quite frankly, and the CIC members have heard me say this, I think you guys are being a lot more intentional in terms of how you are setting your CIC up with a real board that would handle this process. What I would tell you is many communities, the CIC is really the alter ego of the city, of the administration, and it's really just a tool that's used in order to dispose of property without competitive bidding and to bring the money from that property into a place that kind of sits outside of the council purview of appropriating money. And I think that the way we've structured this agreement, consistent with the way we've been kind of instructed by the administration, you guys aren't doing that. This isn't just some legal construct to be able to avoid other provisions of the law, which is what you will see if you start looking at what some other communities do with CICs. Then if you go to section 4, this would be the third function that would be found within 172410. And this would be that the CIC has the right to acquire other property from other third parties and to be able to redevelop, dispose of, et cetera, that property. So it may, Joe Smith LLC may have a piece of property. It may acquire it from that entity. It could acquire it from the land bank. It could acquire it from the county. Any other third party, the CIC has the authority to do that and to then redevelop the property. And because it's a third party involved, there's not a resolution that needs to be adopted between the city and the CIC that governs that acquisition. The CIC kind of has the authority to do that by itself. Then, and so again, all 4 of those sections 1 through 4, really kind of dovetail with 172410 of the revised code in terms of what CICs can do on behalf of cities. As you then go down onto page 4, we have some provisions in here in section 5 in terms of the CIC being able to utilize office space within City Hall, sources or supplies, IT equipment, et cetera. Really the intention of this section 5 is that until the CIC really gets stood up and starts being able to operate on its own, that it would be able to operate within the city facilities at the same time. I would imagine that if this goes the way that everyone's planning, within the next few years, we'll probably be amending that section 5, if nothing else, to provide some compensation back to the city for the use of the facilities. Section 6 then again is a little unique to this agreement, and it provides that once a quarter, a representative of the CIC will come to the city council at a regular meeting and brief the council and the administration on the business and activities of the CIC, as well as identifying and walking through any real property that involves the city under sections 2 and 3 above. And then finally, if you look at section 7, the statute does require us to record this agreement. I don't know why, but it does require that we record it in the county fiscal officer's office. And then the balance of the agreement are kind of the standard boilerplate you're going to have for this type of an agreement and the relationship of the parties. So Eric, I think that probably covers it. If there's anything there that I left off, let me know. And certainly, I'm not sure in terms of timing, if there's time for questions, I certainly can answer any tonight or, come back if you guys need to do it at a different time.
I mean, we have a couple minutes. I would just add 2 things really quickly. In the last whereas clause, where it talks about this, being generally consistent with the city's master plan. We did have a discussion about in the CIC meetings about reviewing that and maybe even updating it. Obviously with the planning department, because it's not likely that most of the people really had read it, and also it's 7 years old, or 8 years old?
8 years old.
8 years old, so things, it's supposed to be updated more often than that. So that is an ongoing discussion. And then I hope section B number of 2B, just, if anybody's got any anxiety, city council shall determine by the adoption of appropriate legislation, the CIC shall have no authority to sell or lease any specific real property without the adoption of appropriate legislation from city council.
Just for clarification, Mr. President. As Mr. Dotson mentioned, that's just in section 2. There's the other
Understood.
section 3 that deals with more direct activity by the CS. Just remind anybody to get confused.
So we got our feet wet. Any quick comments, any questions? All right.
Great job.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Dodson.
Thank you.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, in the discussion about the August calendar, I think we're gonna need to meet every Monday in August. We're gonna have whatever, just backs up to us from the rest of July, and we also have the charter. So the idea that we could do that, and that's all stuff, we need to do together. So just be prepared for maybe like 1 and 3 being committee of the whole and regular meeting, and maybe 2 and 4 being just committee of the whole. Yeah.
I just wanted to confirm, so Jim, you have your housing meeting on that second Monday? And typically, I know you start at 5:30, if we start our committee of the whole at 6, would you be okay to start at 5?
I should be okay with that, but let me take a look at my own personal calendar.
Yes.
Are we gonna need any big blocks of time to deal with the charter changes?
Well, we don't know, but I just want to make sure that we're in agreement. I'm not dictating anything, but we want to. Our goal in the beginning was let's get it on the ballot. So we're hoping Director Hannah will deliver us something, maybe the end of this month. We could take a look at it before the August 4th meeting. But there's only so much we'll be able to do at that meeting. And I'm thinking maybe the second Monday, we just set aside completely for committee of the whole, at least a couple hours. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna mention, I'm gonna be out of town on the 11th, the second Monday. But I'll be gone essentially Wednesday to Wednesday. So before or after, I can squeeze in something additional, if council sees fit, where we can cover it in a different way.
Yeah, actually, if that's just gonna be just a committee of the whole meeting, maybe we'll work around your schedule there. Thank you for that.
Remind me again of what the deadline is for us to have the work on the charter.
I should have looked at, it's the first week in September, but I will find out the date and
In order to get it on the November ballot.
correct.
Okay, thank you.
All right, moving on, in that case, discussion of council's policy for awarding grants. Did you want to lead this?
Yeah,
Yeah, go ahead.
please. When the finance committee met on June 3rd, we talked about the legislation that Vice President Russell introduced to us for the project. And that was asking for $100,000. We do need a policy. Councilmember Manis brought it up, and I totally agree. We need a policy, and we talked about not being overly burdensome Where council provides on the city website an application for nonprofits to request funds from us, the application should include details of the project, how the requested funds will be used, timelines for the project, contact information, and reporting back requirements at 6 months after completion of the project and 6 months after that if necessary. There needs to be a formal way, because we're gonna get more and more of these as the ARPA money's gone. So, do you wanna expand on that for me, please?
Yeah, and I appreciate the work that you're doing, man. Absolutely, we need a way to be able to check and organize them, to be able to go back and see who we donated. And even in addition to that, if council is thinking about doing this annually, setting out budgets so we can see where we are in it, and then pick the award sizes based on whatever that larger pool is. I think anything that we can do around adding structure to that is helpful. Just to add some color for residents, there are 2 nonprofits that asked, this is something that we regularly do, and one of them just moved here, and I said, this isn't something that we regularly do, this is something we look at in council, but I knew where it would get out because of the amount, the size of that award, and nonprofits are really struggling right now, so I think this is the perfect time to do that now, before kind of the floodgates really open, but I think the sheer amount of that size got folks' attention, and so I think it's a great time to build a system and some parameters around that, so it's not a free for all.
Yeah, how do we come up with a budgeted amount? Because like, there's things that would like, what's it called again? I'm sorry.
What?
The 100,000, that
Prentice Place.
Prentice Place. You know that's a one-time thing.
Correct.
Because they've stated
Right.
that. And we know the ones that we've done every year. But there should be some anticipatory amount? I mean, I don't know, what are we talking about here?
Just to add another issue to that is in some of these cases, like in this particular case, the county has also stepped in and invested. And so when you have those dollars there, there's an expectation that we're gonna lean and invest in our own community. And so taking a look at how the county does that for anything in Cleveland Heights and what we need to do, I think is also an important part of that. I don't know what their parameters are around it, but it does look awful if the county's sewing something into Cleveland Heights and then we're not backing that up with anything, but we don't know what that is just based on how those grants are. I can't recall what the county gave them this case.
$250,000.
Okay, so there you go. So you've got a lot there to look at. So I'm not quite sure how you build that, but I'm just taking that in consideration. You'll get those regular requests, and then I'm wondering what the expectations are from anything in terms of county partnerships. Is our expectation that if the county has already leaned into an investment here, is this something that we're gonna back up, or are we still gonna kind of put it through the same process? It's something to back my mind.
That's good to have, I think it's worth having a good discussion about it. Makes sense.
I think the things that this council has given to has been very thoughtful and important. I mean, good investments to the community. But I don't want to give the impression to the public that, you know, we're a bank.
Right.
And
That's correct.
I almost think that maybe in, you know, whatever cover letter we have, we explicitly state that, you know, we're not here to invest in things unless it is, you know, something that is very meaningful for the community. And cite some examples of the things that we've actually done. I'm not sure I would necessarily use the last example of what was done because I think that was a very special case. And I like the idea of we were following the footsteps of the county. But I think we need to be careful with this.
I have seen just how other councils handle similar situations across the country is that they set the tone every year. It's themed. So this year, if we're going to donate to certain organizations, it's to combat this. And then all of those requests coming around that. And then next year might be something different, but it's targeted versus just blanketing it out there and trying to hit a bunch of things. But if we're saying we're targeting youth or targeting public health or targeting this or that, I think it helps to kind of focus, and then council can speak to that, the city can speak to why they invested those funds and expected impact. And it also gives clarity to the organization that this isn't my year or my time, it doesn't fit into that. But I think any parameter we can get around it would be helpful. But if the council as itself said, you know what, this is what we're trying to target this year, that might also be helpful versus bringing in all of these requests from everyone. If we're trying to target a specific thing that we're trying to impact, it also might help.
I like that, the theme, because it may be something that's a crisis happening in the city at that particular moment that nonprofits come in can help with. I like that.
So how do we wanna do that? Like, do we wanna formulate this kind of thing in the finance committee and then bring it here? Is that the plan, like in August?
Our meeting's on the 19th of August. I can add this to our agenda. If the committee members don't mind, I'd be happy to start to work on an application based on some other or cities. Also, I think we need to work with Brian Iorio,
Yeah.
because if somebody's getting money through CDBG, then like we did with ARPA, we did the same thing. That will be part of the application question. Are you
It's not
requesting
double.
money?
You're not getting double funds.
Or are they denied? Are they?
Or is there an area where, yeah,
So if that's okay, it sounds like it's okay with the committee that we work on that on the 19th.
okay. All right, that sounds good. Anything under other? Yes,
Mr. President, I looked at the Board of Elections website, the charter amendments deadline for the November election is September 5th.
thank you.
We lost 4 days. Where did it?
I know it was. Along with that, just going back to the last discussion, I know we had some issues with the Prentice project because of the allocations. So I think that's something else that in finance we wanna talk about is as we're making a decision, so it's not holding up anything that we're doing, because I think right now it's just because we don't know where we wanna get the money from.
Fine.
So I
What
think
fund?
just in the future, making sure we know what we're taking it out of, and that would be helpful so that they're not waiting ahead of time. So this is, I knew there was something else I wanted to.
Yeah, that's-
Creating a line item, you mean?
Uh-huh.
that shouldn't be happening. We're like, there's something we want to do, but we have no idea how we can do it. All right, well, in that case, this meeting is adjourned at 7:26.